Hey, 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 this is Sandra coming to you direct from Hayward, California, the heart of the San Francisco Bay Area, where I was born and raised. Who I am in a nutshell. I am a first-generation Chicana in the U.S., also the first in my family to go to college. My parents are immigrants from Mexico. I have a bachelor's degree in Chicano studies from UC Berkeley and my master's degree in counseling from Cal State Hayward. I have been a California community college counselor for the past 20 years. I provide academic, career, and personal counseling in one-on-one sessions, as well as in college success courses. In these Brown Bag podcasts, my intention is to share my experiences working with my community and my college students. You will meet some of my mentors and awesome colleagues who have motivated me to continue doing the work that I do.
Hello, my name is Monique Williams. I am currently an English instructor at Chabot College. I work with the Emoja program. I am the Tri-Chair of the Student Access, Success, and Equity Committee, and I am a member of the CCEPG. I was born and raised in Hayward, California, and I am a proud Chabot College graduate. I earned a BA from Mills and an MA from San Francisco State, but I never left Chabot. It's my home. And I have been a part of the institution in many different ways. I've been a student, an administrator, and now I'm a teacher. I have had the privilege of seeing the college through 3 different lenses. I joined the Brown Bag podcast because of the 2 women I get to be in conversation with, Sandra and Carmen. These women, with a lot of care, teach me more about how to best serve the Chabot College community. I hope listening to this podcast will give you the same opportunity for growth that each conversation with these women gives to me. So hello, welcome back to the Brown Bag podcast. This week we are all together, all 3 of us. So it's Carmen, me, Monique, and Sandra. And we're here to talk to you about a really wonderful holiday that's coming up. But before that, we want to make sure that we do our What's Giving Us Life. So whoever wants to start, can you please tell me what's giving you life right now?
Well, I will start. The last couple of days I've had like a sore throat. And so I've just kind of been kicking back. And I've been watching a show, as usual, called Girls 5 Eva on Netflix. And it is so...
I love that show!
You love that show?
I love it so much!
So funny. It's really funny. It's basically about these like 4 women that were in a 5 harmony like girl group in their 20s, and of course they broke up, but now they're in their 40s and they're trying to like get their career going again. And so it's really funny. I mean, you could just imagine what that would be like to be in 40s and be a parent. They're just very different, distinct characters, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of that Tina Fey show with Alec Baldwin, kind of 30 Rock. It kind of reminds me of that a little bit because it's very like has a lot of references to pop culture and it's just zany, but it's been fun. It's just like a cute little thing to pop on and enjoy, and just it makes me laugh out loud. So I've been enjoying that. That's giving me a little bit of life these days. What about you, Sandra?
Oh my gosh, I recorded a TikTok. And it's been fun to see people's reactions to it. I've recorded several TikToks, but this one is, I'm a Puente counselor because, and so it's short, funny. That's just, I recorded it a few weeks ago. The Puente Club put it up on their Instagram. And then I just didn't put it on my social media right away. I just let it in. They're like, oh my gosh, Miss Hanetta, you're trending. And what? Like, whatever. And they're like, no, really, it was trending for a little while because there were so many views and people are sharing it and forwarding it and opening it. And we have so many views. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. Like, cool, I guess. And so then I put it on my social media this past week and it has exploded. And it's been really fun to see that. And people just reaching out, like, how do you become a Puente counselor? Oh, I'm a counselor. Oh, I'm a past Puente student. And so that's been fun. And the Puente State office just reached out to me this morning to see if they could see it. Like, so, yeah.
I want to see it. You got to share it with us.
I know. I want to see it.
Okay.
That's amazing because that's the original intention of social media, right? It's to spread like good information and needed information and to just have fun. And so that sounds really nice. Oh, I want to see it. You're going to have to screen share it with us.
Oh, I will.
So my when we're doing what's giving me life, I think it's a weird. I'm in a spot. I've been at Chabot for like 20 years in some sort of like capacity, right? And so it's been a really long time. And I met with a friend this morning, and she's 10 years older than me. And she was talking about like, this kind of moment in your life where you're feeling like there's some like you're ready to do another thing, like another something that is like a part of you, right? Because you've gotten this part of you settled, you know what it's about. And there's always like this feeling like that you have to like almost like leave the other thing. And so you don't do whatever that new thing is because you don't want to leave it. And so we were talking about that. And I think in general, that conversation gave me life, just being able to like vocalize, like loving my job and loving what I do, but also feeling not completely satisfied and feeling like there needs to be something else coming, like, and that there are so many other things that I do want to do and other places that I want to see myself in. And so just like being with someone who is very kind of like supportive of having like like being in multiple spaces and in different ways and feels like that's okay, is kind of like just giving me life, just feeling that. So that's mine.
It's important to have those conversations in a safe space too, of somebody who, like, if you say something that they're like, oh, Monique's gonna go on and do this, and it's just like, oh no, I'm just like, like what it would feel like, or what would it be like?
Right. Right. Because it feels like every time I talk about anything like that at the college, it's almost like, oh, Monique's going to quit her job. She hates it here. It's, it's like, no, I just like, I'm a whole ass person, like, like that's all, like that's it.
And so that was in her life.
Right. So, it's a part of it, but it's not just it, yeah.
I just have so much creative energy inside us, that's just waiting to be explored, and it's hard to just kind of limit yourself. To when you have ideas and passions and interests, but also I think even more challenging when you're parenting, right? Because that in itself is such a huge job,
Right.
So how do you even like set aside time for your passions? And it's
right. And to start something when you're like already in the middle of so many other things, that you don't want to drop. And so it's like, like, I think even just like thinking about starts differently. Like when I was younger, you started something, you put your head 100% in it, all your hours went in it, your life was all about it, like this start of something probably doesn't look that way. It might look like doing a little bit of something every once in a while, it might look like just doing, like a 5-year start or whatever, rather than like going like, when we were kids, it was like, we're going to go all in. I'm all in. And it's like, no.
You can be like all in with your heart and just maybe not all in with your energy, because your energy is required in lots of different places. I mean, I've been working on this novel for like 4 years. Sometimes summers I have lots of time, other times I don't. Sometimes it's like, oh, I have 5 minutes, let me just go in here for a second, or a half hour or whatever. But it does feel good to have something that is just kind of for me, and isn't connected to work or even other people. It's just like me and like my imagination and mind and stuff. And I know Sandra has all kinds of creative projects that she does, all kinds of art that she does.
I did my doll show last month or whatever, last week, however long ago it was. It seems like last month, but it was like 2 weeks ago. And it's like I just packed everything up and put it away. Like I did it, I'm done with it for now. Ready to do the next thing.
Yeah. And it's like how much and when you do that next thing, I think it's just like as a adult with all these responsibilities, I just have to wrap my head around thinking about that differently. Like not like you said, Carmen, if I pick up the pen for 4 minutes, then I'm like happy about those 4 minutes rather than feeling like, oh, that's not enough. It's never going to get anywhere. I'm not going to do anything with this, which then makes me walk away. And I think part of this feeling started because I was actually talking to a student, and the student was like, oh my gosh, you've done so much. What are you going to do after you're done teaching? And I was like, I'm just going to chill. Like, I'm not going to do anything. Like, I'm just going to chill. But then I realized like all the things that I had talked about with the student that I had done were all things I had done in the past. Right? Like none of it was really like things I was doing in the present. And it's like, yes, I have done a lot in the past, but then I felt like, oh, but I'm not like, there's nothing right now, like, and so it just kind of, I don't know, it made me think like, am I doing that because I don't want to, or am I doing that just because I have this feeling of like, you have to do that a certain way, So, yeah.
Those are such good questions that you're asking yourself, and it's like, maybe you're just in like a generative,
Yeah.
Stage where things are just like, and then all of a sudden it'll come to you like, oh, I want to do this, and get to be really patient with yourself.
Yeah, which is important. Yeah. Well, like I said, today we're going to be talking about a holiday that is coming up. It has been celebrated in California for a long time. And however, many of us celebrate this holiday without not knowing any of the history behind it, except for what beers tells us to know about it, right? So instead, we're going to honor it. And we're going to honor it by listening to some history from Sandra about Cinco de Mayo and having a discussion about this celebration. So Sandra, you want to tell us more about Cinco de Mayo and why it's so important?
Yes. As a Mexican American, as a Chicana, growing up here in the Bay Area, it's always been a celebration that we've had, at least in my community. But it wasn't really until I found my voice as a community college student at Ohlone that I started questioning, why we're celebrating it, because it's not Mexican Independence Day, right? Why doesn't Mexico celebrate it, but we're celebrating it here? And the way we celebrate it is a very community-oriented way. So it was always like there's a car show, some kind of festival, some kind of like vendor selling Mexican artifacts, like artistic expression through music and dance, ballet folklorico, Aztec dancers, mariachi, different types of music. And it's the gathering of a community. And it was usually fundraising, like the vendors are selling arts and crafts, to the organization that's sponsoring it or hosting it is fundraising for scholarships or is fundraising for something. There's something at the end of, a reason why they're celebrating it. And throughout the years, we've seen that celebration, that community become very commercial and almost appropriation. Before I go on into the history, let me go ahead and just recently, I wrote this poem because in my household, my husband and I are getting ready to celebrate. We're on the board to host the Cinco de Mayo celebration in downtown Hayward on Saturday, May 4th. And so as we were getting Cinco de Mayo, having the conversations of Cinco de Mayo in our house, I needed to put something down that I was feeling. And so this is my version of Cinco de Mayo. War's musical lyrics hit in such a way that you can't help but feel the music move through your soul. That song automatically takes me to a place and time in my life where I feel happy. I am in community. I am at peace. I am moving. I am dancing in the streets, feeling the beat awaken up my body after such a long winter sleep. Shaking the winter out of my bones, feeling the sun radiate through my body, giving it energy to dance. Smelling the tacos and corn that the vendors are making as I dance in the streets for Cinco de Mayo. Hearing the familiar sounds of the street fair and being in community as we all take in the sun and the beat as it awakens our body from the long winter sleep, and we move and smile and drink in the streets for Cinco de Mayo. War's musical lyrics hit in such a way that you can't help but feel the music move through your soul. That song automatically takes me to a place and time. Cinco de Mayo, Cinco de Mayo, Cinco de Mayo by Sandra Genera.
Beautiful. Thanks
And
for
so
sharing
it's
that,
like
Sandra.
Cinco de Mayo has never been like let's go have dinner or it's always been like some kind of community or some kind of festival, vendors. If I'm not selling something, or as a vendor, I'm helping fundraise. It wasn't until I read Dr. David Hayes Bautista's Cinco de Mayo, El Cinco de Mayo, an American tradition, that I realized how deep the history goes in having community events celebrated. Cinco de Mayo is not the Mexican Independence Day. Cinco de Mayo has its roots in the second French intervention in Mexico, which took place in the aftermath of the 1846 through 48 Mexican-American War and the 1858 to 1861 Reform War. The Reform War was a civil war that pitted liberals against conservatives who favored a tight bond between the Catholic Church and the Mexican state. These wars nearly bankrupted the Mexican treasury. On July 17, 1861, Mexican President Benito Juarez issued a moratorium in which all foreign debt payments would be suspended for 2 years. In response, France, Spain, and the United Kingdom held a convention in London and joined an alliance to send naval forces to Veracruz, Mexico, to demand reimbursement. France, at the time, was ruled by Napoleon III and decided to use the opportunity to establish an empire in Mexico that would favor French interests, whereupon Britain and Spain negotiated with Mexico and peacefully withdrew. The empire was part of an envisioned Latin America, which is a term used to imply cultural kinship of the region with France that would rebuild French influence in the American continent and exclude Anglophone American territories. Along with the Civil War going on in the United States, the Californios decided to start raising money to send to the Mexican troops to Mexico so that they can build their army and military to fight off the French that were going to be coming in to take over the territory. And so in late 1861, a well-armed French fleet attacked Veracruz, Mexico, landing a large French force and driving President Juarez and his government into retreat. Moving on from Veracruz towards Mexico City, the French army encountered heavy resistance from the Mexicans close to Puebla and the Mexican forts of Loreto and Guadalupe. The French army of 6,500 to 8,000 army men attacked a poorly equipped Mexican army of 4,000. On May 5th, 1862, the Mexicans decisively defeated the French army. The victory represented a significant morale boost to the Mexican army and the Mexican people at large, and helped to establish a sense of national unity and patriotism. But in reality, Cinco de Mayo started to come into vogue in the 1940s America during the rise of the Chicano movement. The holiday crossed over from California into the rest of the United States in the 1950s and 60s, but it did not gain popularity until the 1980s when marketers, especially beer companies, capitalized on the celebratory nature of the day and began to promote it. It grew in popularity and evolved into a celebration of Mexican culture and heritage, first in areas with large Mexican American populations. And now there's Mexican Americans everywhere in the United States. To know and hear that since the 1940s, and even in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, when the Californios were here, and they'd hear about the French coming in, or the United Kingdom or Spain trying to come back into Mexican territories, they were like, oh, we need to raise monies, especially during the times of Benito Juarez being president. They would have dances and raise money. They would have dinners and raise money and send that money back to Mexico so that they can build their military forces. That seems, even though we're not sending money back to Mexico now, realizing that Mexico does not celebrate in the same way that California celebrates Cinco de Mayo. In the town of Puebla, they do. I feel proud to be able to still keep that tradition of fundraising and raising monies and bringing the community together. La Alianza de Hayward, which is the main sponsor and host for the Cinco de Mayo, at least here in Hayward, they do have goals of raising money. And one of their main goals is to, in the new Hayward Library, to have a room dedicated to Cesar Chavez and have the books and history and readings of Cesar Chavez, the UFW, and Chicano heroes, Mexican American heroes, Latino heroes, and increase the literature that 50% of our students in Hayward are of Latino, Latinx descent. And so having a space, having a place where they can find literature that will share the same experiences or similar experiences as them, be able to hear words and stories that they may have grown up with at home is part of our cultural narrative that needs to get shared, right? So what do you guys think? How have you celebrated Cinco de Mayo?
Well, I just appreciate me just sharing that history. I mean, I didn't really know. I mean, I knew that like it was definitely like being culturally appropriated. I knew that it wasn't like the Mexican independence, but I didn't know like the whole story. So I really appreciate learning from you. And then also like I didn't know that like it was the French that tried to occupy Mexico. And so it made me just wonder, you know, I mean, obviously it didn't succeed, but I wondered if there was anything in Mexico that like looked influenced by the French, you know, by them trying to do that, if there was any kind of remnants
Their
in Mexican
pastries,
culture that were connected to
our
France at
bread,
all.
and they're like,
Oh,
it's
really?
French, like culinary. What is it? Patisserie?
Yeah, like some like pan dulce. That's like influenced by the French.
Well, it's
French leave their bread everywhere.
Yeah, it's like
and it was, and the
Enjoy.
reason why the French weren't successful too
Enjoy
is
the
because the
butter.
Civil War was going on. So if the Civil War wasn't going on in the South in particular, like the United States would have gone in to help aid the French in occupying Mexico. Right. So there was a lot of things, historical things going on. Had a lot of haters because he was the first that indigenous president in Mexico at that time, and so people didn't want him to succeed. Right. He was a president of the people.
That's so cool. That's really, really cool. Yeah.
So I'd also like to say thank you. That is the second time that I've heard that history. First time was from your husband when I was 13 years old. And I remember it was me and Jesse Ramirez. I'm Puerto Rican. He's El Salvadorian. We were both like, are we really the people that are going to be going up there to like say like the history? And I remember Mr. Hinera said, you know what? It's important for all of us to know each other's histories. And it's important for all of us to know why we celebrate, because if not, they keep breaking us apart. And I remember because of that, we studied so hard and we were like, we're Mexican for the day. We studied so hard. And there was so much like importance, even in that, like at that young age, to learn that like real narratives were not being told to us. You know, like, and this is happening to all over the place. It was just such an impactful moment. It was so important. And it actually created this kind of habit for me and for Jesse. I still talk to him about knowing what holidays mean. You know, like knowing what are we celebrating? Like, what is this thing? Like, what is, you know, like, what is this thing that we're getting commercialized, right? And that we forget to actually like look and say, well, what was the heart of that? And I think so much of like what you talked about, you know, like even in your poetry about this being a community event and making sure that we get scholarships. Well, I think a lot of that is tied to the fact that the Chicano movement picked it up. That was a movement that was, you know, like from people who were attending colleges, who were going to schools, wanted to see other people be able to have those opportunities, right? And so you start beginning to raise money through this celebration of community and bringing each other up together. And then it's also attached to the Californios who sent money to people to aid people in order to get a better place, you know, like to not be under oppressive rule. And then it also leads you to like learning about the Californios, you know, like this idea there were not people of Mexico here who were actually doing quite well. You know, like who could host dinners, who could host parties, who had political pull, who had, who owned all these farms that were like around here, you know, like these, like it gives you a lens into something that we often do not discuss which is actually like the power and influence of BIPOC people, right? And like how much, like how resilient, but also how real it was, just like in African American history, right? How real it was that there are, like, it's not like a bunch of people that weren't doing well, or like just had to, like that there are different narratives, right? There's multiple narratives, and it's important for us to know all of those. Yeah, thank you for the history, and thank you to Mr. Caneda for the history when I was little, but like that history is just so important. And I think anytime we see something taken and commercialized, I almost become suspicious. Like, what are you trying to hide? What are you trying to make me not find out? And just kind of get swept up in this like commercial presence, rather than getting at what is this really about,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it definitely made me think a little bit. I've been talking with people a lot lately about just this idea of nation building and just colonialization, and just this idea that France even had the audacity to like think that they were going to like come to Mexico and like take it over or set up shop there, and just fascinated by that mindset that people, I mean, and so many of our nations in the world have been created because of that, because somebody went in and said, they wanted the land, and, they eradicated the people, and, or tried to assimilate the people, or, practice colonialization, and, all of those things. And I'm just, it's just so fascinating to me, just like what kind of goes through somebody's mind. And I know at that time period, it's like this whole North American continent just seemed, it seemed like to Europe, it felt up for grabs, right? Like whoever was here to claim it and beat down the people and take it. But it's just so, yeah, it's just interesting how much
and
people
sitting here
feel
getting
like
emotional
that
because
they can do that they have the liberty
well,
to do that.
thank you, Monique, for recognizing the work that we've put into our community, my husband and I, but also like the importance of ethnic studies, the importance of knowing each other's, the importance of learning about different cultures taught to me, and so I felt like that's part of my obligation as an ethnic studies, major, as a Chicano studies major, to be able to share and pass on. And so thank you for inviting me to be part of the Brown Bag podcast so that we can share, and hopefully be able to provide some professional development, so to provide a different view, a different lens of how we as women of color experience education.
Yeah, so many of these conversations, especially about like culture and leaving out like the importance of culture and the like what actually happened, lead us to like create more separation rather than creating, like oh well, that happened in my culture too, or that never happened, but I want to avoid that. And like thank you for sharing that, or like things that like it just gives so much power when we really look into the things that we weren't taught, like, and ethnic studies is often doing that. And also social justice classes like in SIN are often looking at those things that haven't necessarily been shared with us. Like we talk all the time about, what kind of books are you using or what are you bringing into the classroom? And I think that as instructors, sometimes we avoid the things that we don't know. And so we stick to, if we haven't studied a whole class in it, we won't teach it. Right. Or if we haven't, but it's like, one, the students will teach you. And two, like you've been through college, you're smart. You'll
figure it out.
Yeah, and you'll make some mistakes, but it's okay to make those mistakes. Like because it's much better to unearth these histories. Like even just talking about Cinco de Mayo, there's a long history there's different towns that have different celebrations because there were several different battles in several different places, and I didn't know that until I decided to use the book Gordo in class, and they were talking about in Gordo. There's this man that comes to the garlic fields, and he's redheaded and blue-eyed, and he's mute, so he can't talk, but he understands everybody in Spanish. And the Gordo's parents say, he's Mexican, just like us. And Gordo's confused as hell because here's this bright redheaded dude, right? So it leads me and my class through this whole history of the St. Patrick's Battalion that was only in a certain point that was fighting against the American takeover of Mexico because they came from Ireland that was taken over by Europe. And they were like, oh, these Americans are doing the same thing to these Mexican people. That's wrong. And so they decided to fight together. So it's like all, like these histories of fighting against oppression, of being actually like effective in that fight, of like winning these things, of pride, of creating community across, like different backgrounds and ethnicities, like all of those things we don't talk about, and it's so important to talk about.
And one thing
right?
about the
how
book
like those
that
things bring us together
Dr.
is
David
just
H.
so rich,
Bautista wrote is that he goes back and he pulls out the newspapers, and there's ads in the newspapers from the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s announcing the festivals or the dance or the event that's going to fundraise for the Mexican troops. And so just reminding ourselves that there's actual, like, everything's not on Google, right? Everything's not on YouTube, that we can actually go into a library and pull documents up. And so I think that was the other thing that was really that really hit me when I read that book. It was like, okay, this, I don't know, I don't want to say like this is true or it gives it validity, but it was just a reminder that like the importance of showing our students how to use a library.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the exciting things I think about teaching history is like helping students kind of unearth those artifacts and analyze them and think about their current applications. And one book that I taught in Sin for a long time was A Different Mirror by Ronald Takaki, and it's like a multicultural history of America. And every time I would teach that book, the students would be like, "Oh my God, we're all fucked. We're all messed up. America's messed us all over." I'm like, "Yes, finally you get it." Like there's just been so many policies and laws that have just been harmful to every single person of color, in this country. And the more that we can see that, then the more we can be allies to each other to resist oppression. And that was another piece that really stuck out to me in learning about this. I mean, you asked before, Sandra, like, how do you celebrate Cinco de Mayo? And I don't think I ever did. I mean, I never was like, let's go have margaritas, like go do that type of thing. And I think also, like, I just felt like it wasn't, it seemed like, it was a Mexican holiday. And so it belonged to like Mexican folks. But now after listening to this, I really felt connected to like the idea of resistance, right? Just that like here, that France greatly like underestimated Mexico, right? And that they, beat them again and again and again. And it just got me thinking a lot about like, one, just the power of resistance and how do we do it? How do we keep resisting over and over and over again in the face of what could have been like a mighty power, and I think we're all up against that in lots of different ways. But also I wondered about just being underestimated and like if you two had ever, felt underestimated and what that was like and kind of how you kind of, kept going.
Well, most
even
definitely.
though,
I mean, my own family underestimated me. Right. My grandpa, my great aunt I'm the first of my 27 cousins that went to college and went to the university. Right. And so I'm the first to get my bachelor's degree. And so, I mean, I have now a social worker, I have a lawyer, I have teachers, but I think out of the 27 of us, there's only 6 that have degrees. Mostly everybody started some kind of college, but never finished. And so it was always like, ¿Y tú quién te crees? Who do you think you are? Like, what's going to make you different? Your mom's illiterate. What do you think you can do? And so, like, yeah, there was always that, like, oh shit. Like when the shit got hard at Berkeley, I'm like, oh, that's right. What the hell am I doing here? Like, I don't like what, maybe they were right. Maybe I don't deserve to be here. Because I don't even know why I'm here. Like, I don't know what's out there. And so maybe I should have just stayed at Wells Fargo at my like bank job. But I knew there was something else out there. And my father just said, go for it. Go, we'll be there with you. Like, and so that's the only way that I was able to move forward.
It's so powerful.
I think, yeah. I mean, as a woman, I think every woman in general is constantly underestimated, but also asked to do everything. Right? But I think, yeah, for sure, I came, like my my neighborhood is a low income neighborhood. My family didn't go to college. It was not a thing. You went and got a job. And just not just in college, but anything I wanted to do. Like when I was really young, I was already a writer, so I was already writing, and it was like, what are you doing? Like that's not what we like. What do you think somebody's gonna pick you up and like make a book out of you or something? Like that's nobody cares about your story. Nobody cares about like, I mean, so and even just the like a drive, like the idea that at some point I was gonna lose my drive or I was gonna not care or like the things that come with like being a woman. Oh, she's going to care right now. She'll be all passionate about it right now. And then it's just going to fizzle out, like, and, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I'm not bad looking either. So like, so then there's that, like, oh, it's just, they gave you a shot because you're pretty. It has nothing to do with your merit or how many degrees you've earned or how many hours you've put in and stuff, like it has everything to do with the way you look. And it's like this constant desire to want me to reduce myself in the same way they chose or wanted to reduce me. And I've always fought against that. Like I've always, like been like, well, I mean, you don't see it, but I see it. Cool, whatever. And I luckily have ran into people like Mr. Hanera, like people at La Familia, like Zappa, like you have always just like said, like you're doing dope things, like, and it was about the things and it was about what you could do. And it was about, like how you presented yourself or what you put together about the work that have validated those pieces, even while those very loud things are in my head, I think that's something that we all experience, but I think it's definitely, like it's that intersectionality of being like BIPOC and a woman. Is the community is quite loud, like about like what even if they don't believe it, what other people might think about you, right? People always feel like they need to tell you what other people might think, even if that's not their expectation. So yeah, I'd like to say that like my parents or anybody like was supportive or anything, but literally I always tell like I always said, like get mad at my husband. Like he's like, well, your parents, they were nice about it when you graduated. But my parents, they wrote me a card when I graduated. And in the card, it said, good job. No one told you to do this.
Damn. Like, what does that even mean?
Good job, Woody. Congratulations on graduating. No one told you to do this. It's just like,
but you did it on your own. I don't know. Oh. They didn't finish the sentence. We're so proud of you.
I was like, cool. Thanks. And so it's kind of just been like finding motivation outside of.
It's been the community for me. That Hayward community. Like I grew up in Fremont, born and raised in Fremont, but Hayward has been so good to me. So many mentors and so many educators and so many people have really showed me the ropes and took me under their wing and as activists and as educators and as mentors have really opened up their offices to me so that I could feel comfortable enough to have my office express who I am. And so I think that's really deep. Like that's been a really deep, I've had many people, colleagues tell me, you're doing too much, you just do too much. And it's just like, yeah, maybe because I've had to. Like I've had to do too much all my life. Like it hasn't come easy, right? It's because I've put the work, I put the time, I put the hours like into it. And so if I expect my students to do it, then I need to be right there with them too, right? So
totally.
How about you, Carmen?
Yeah, I was thinking here, trying to think about my own question. I feel like I don't know if I mean, I'm a Black woman, so I think just like I know what racism is, and I know that like people don't, have their expectations of Black women. I think coming up, but I feel like I was very like, I'm gonna do me, like this is my plan, this is what I'm doing. It's only me. I only got me. I can't really, worry too much about if people and don't, if they underestimate me or they don't get what I'm trying to do, I mean, I think similar, like my parents they were kind of indifferent around college. I was just going to say that my mom was like very supportive financially. She always, helped with money and getting cars and moving and changing colleges. Like, so I feel like she was very supportive. I don't think she quite understood. Neither of my parents went to college. So I think that was part of it. Like, they just didn't understand, they just didn't understand like that world, and I was just on my own. It's like, I did just similar sound. I had to figure it out. I had to keep going. I had to do the damn thing, as they say, it's like, wasn't no one going to do it for me. And I think what I have found, like, when I was a young adult, or just even as I grow, is that I'm not really somebody that like talks about what like my accomplishments or I don't even, not to my friends even. I mean, I don't think half of my friends know the stuff I do at Chabot. I don't know what that is. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. So I think when people find out, they're like so surprised. You're like, oh, you did that, and oh, you did that. And I don't know if it's, maybe I underestimate myself, I don't know, but I think just, yeah, definitely being a Black woman in society, that you're just up against the racism 24/7. So, and I think I've just had to kind of have blinders on in a lot of ways, like a horse, when they have those blinders on, they can't see. Like, I feel like I've just had to have that. It's interesting too, because, since Kristen and I have been working closely together, she's the one that points it out to me. She's like, oh, that was racism, or it's probably because of racism, or, this is hard because of all the racism you've endured. I'm like, I'm like, yeah, you're pretty, yeah, because you just keep going, but what else are you going to do, So yeah, I think that's how it sits for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a form of protection, right? Like, I mean, and it's hard to take down those protective barriers that you've created, because with them you've been successful, right? Like, so it's like, I mean, if you need to protect yourself, that means that there's pain, like, and so that's very real.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Santa Clara and San Jose. I mean, I was often the only Black person in my class, maybe one or two. I mean, our graduating class, there were like 10 of us out of like 250 students, I mean, I think I was at my high school reunion one year, and one of my white, student from that I had classes all the time, he pulled me aside and was like, he wanted to apologize for something he said to me. And I was like, I have no idea. I'm like, what did you say? He's like, you know what I said. I was like, I have no idea. So it was probably something racist that I've just blocked out, So I think, yeah, it was just definitely part of survival. It's like, if I really, and probably just not even understanding it, not even understanding that that's what was happening was racism. And I think if I paid too much attention to it, I would have just gone under. And things were already hard within my family, so to have to like pay attention to that too I would have tanked. So I just put those blinders on and kept it pushing. That's a lot of info.
It is, but it's a lot of info that I think that a lot of people have probably experienced, and we don't discuss. And like I say, like the more and more, hopefully, that we hire people that, represent and are part of our community, the more we're going to have to hold space for those stories, and for processing through that, and for talking about different histories, and for talking about the way we've treated or mistreated histories, events, like celebrations, people, like, and I think that the institution maybe doesn't quite understand that, right? Because it hasn't necessarily been a space made to hold people, in even women, like we're a college with a lot of women that are a part of the community that runs the college. How often do we hold space for women to talk about how the institution is hard for them, or how women's history or histories of women have been skewed or misrepresented or not even discussed, right? And so I think that it's important that our institutions start doing that. Like this conversation that we're having about Cinco de Mayo should be a large, loud conversation that the institution is having, if we are actually saying that we are going to be, a college that is supportive, and, a college that understands and welcoming to the community that we actually serve, right? So with that, coming to the end of our recording, and like every single time we do our exit tickets, which is, like a recommendation or something that we want to say that people should get into. You've already given one to a certain extent, Carmen. So let's see if you could dig up another one for us.
I would say go out and celebrate a Cinco de Mayo. Go attend a Cinco de Mayo festivity. You are supporting the community. It takes a lot to put on an event like that. And the vendors are out there are small businesses of color, small, women-owned businesses that are trying to make a living out here. A lot of school groups, our Puente students are going to be out at the Hayward Festival, Cinco de Mayo Festival, selling the waters and sodas, and they're going to be the only booth selling waters and sodas. It's a fundraising for them. So we're hoping to be able to build our scholarship fund and funds for the Puente Club to be able to go out and learn and explore and attend events and activities in their community.
Yeah. I guess too, just to build on that, the thing that I would recommend is to really explore art by Latinx creators and artists. And I feel like just over this last year, I've just gotten to have a lot of contact. I was at a Puente workshop last summer, and it was right next to the Cheech in LA, which I had never heard of before. Apparently, like Cheech Marin has like a huge collection of Chicano art, and he puts it on display, and it's amazing. It was just so amazing. So I took a bunch of pictures, and I've been using it like in my class and on my syllabus. We went to downtown to San Jose Museum last summer and saw an exhibit there. I want to say the artist is Yolanda Lopez. I might be wrong. Is that right, Sandra? Yeah. And it was amazing, just great art. And there's an exhibit happening right now, I think, at the Oakland Museum with another Chicano artist. I don't know their name. Say it again.
Malaquias Montoya.
Malaquias Montoya. And so I think that there's just like all this great art, by Latinx folks that we could really be tapping into and just to learn more, and just super talented artists. So that's what I would recommend. And I will give you another show recommend. We just finished Fallout on Prime, which is really good. If you can stomach a little bit of violence and a little bit of gore, it's like a dystopic nuclear war, after nuclear war, what happens? But it's based on a video game, so it's got a lot of action, it's got a little camp and some humor, and it was fun. It was fun to watch. You can also follow me on Instagram at Carmy Strings, CarmeeStreams, if you want to just know what I'm watching. I always try to post things and keep y'all up to date, so you can follow me there too.
I'm totally gonna do that because I've never been disappointed by a show you recommend.
Oh yay!
Never. So I'll continue the vein of saying, be intentional when you're going to Cinco de Mayo celebrations, celebrating in a way that the holiday was intended to be celebrated. So are people doing things for the community, go to those celebrations rather than are people just trying to make a lot of money on that day for their own personal profit? And to be like that person that's a little annoying that way and steer your friends towards the things that are for the community. And also to be the person that learns how to correct people when they're not knowing the history of something, or when these are hard conversations to have, but like learning how to do that well is only going to open you up to more great conversations rather than, closing people off. And I think that we've become so afraid of saying like, oh, that's not really what the holiday is about. Or, like, hey, let me tell you a little bit about something, because it's like everybody's just trying to have fun. But that is part of the fun of it. Right. Part of the fun, part of the reason it lights you up is because you know that it's a really good thing. Right. And so to not be afraid to share histories, to correct people in kind ways, so that way, we can actually celebrate with its true intentions. My recommendation.
Yay, thank you.
Yeah. And we'll see y'all again next month then.